Welcome back to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together. My name is Jenny.
And I'm Joel.
And today we have a wonderful interview and conversation with Abhi, the designer, programmer, and writer of Visai Games. But before we hop into that, as always, if you have the opportunity, quick second to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or rate us on Spotify, please do so because it's super helpful to us. But yeah, the conversation was awesome. I'm super excited for y'all to hear it. Joel, what would you like to share in terms to give a taste test to the listeners?
I mean, I think the word Easter egg would be appropriate here. There are so many things happening in this game that I did not realize were happening. And the second you said it, I was like, oh man, that really makes me rethink that particular scene. So especially if you love understanding like some of the details that are really making me experience that experience, this is the conversation for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was super illuminating. We've already talked about how this game does a wonderful job of embedding a ton of details and allowing us to feel really universal themes. And we really get to see how truly detailed these details are.
In the best way.
In the best way. Please just note for any listeners who haven't finished the game, because the game is so short, there will be spoilers abound. So use your discretion. If you like to avoid spoilers, maybe play it before listening. But if you don't mind listening to some spoilers and you're still excited to play, please keep a truckin', keep listening. It's a good conversation. All right. So yeah, here we go.
Let's get cooking.
Cool. So, Abhi, welcome to Geeks and Grounds. We are super excited to talk about Venba with you. My first question is just, how are you feeling? How are you doing? Launch is pretty shortly. We're not too far removed from the launch date. So, are you feeling good?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. It's been really good to see all the receptions and the reactions and the reviews. But overall, we just can't believe it's out. It's been so long that we've been working on it. But yeah, it's been great.
Yeah. How long was the development process for Venba?
It's a bit elongated because for most of it, me and the rest of the team were part time. But we started the idea exactly 2020 January is when we started thinking about it and talking about it. And I think it's only last year that I was able to quit my job and go full time. And slowly the rest of the team joined also. And it's only like right now you're seeing the new office, but it was exactly on launch day. We all got here together and pressed the launch button again.
That's such a great way to
cool.
bring in
Start.
good energy in the new office.
Yeah, I was assembling furniture the day before. That's how I was trying to get my mind out. Yeah.
Wow, man, that is so incredible. And so, like, is the team feeling good? Like, we obviously are loving this game, and everyone in our community has been raving about it. But are you guys? Has the energy been high with the team?
Yeah, I think mostly it's the first time we're launching a game, so people told us all sorts of things, like, oh, you might cry, you might be depressed, you might go into something called post-launch depression and all of these things, right? So, but mostly we're just it's been great. It's been great to watch the reactions and we would watch streams together and everything. It's always been fun to see those reactions. Sometimes a little sad to see them get sad, but yeah, we're just really happy because throughout development, you would think about, would this work out? Would people get this and will people get that? You would really kill yourself over like small details and decisions. But to see that people are picking up on those it's very validating, and it's been
Yeah.
happy.
I'm curious if you have a favorite stream or moment that you've seen a creator or reaction of a player. I think just the other day or a couple days ago, you shared, or your account on Twitter shared, a stream that I thought was absolutely wonderful because it was someone playing, and I think her mom was in the chat, just kind of saying like, no, you have to do it in this order because her mom knew how to make these things. I'm curious if
Yeah.
you have a favorite moment.
Yeah, so there's two of them. Both of them are by Tamil YouTubers
Mhm.
back home, and they were super excited for Venba. And as soon as it came out, they got it and they were streaming it. One of them was also played it with his mom, and it was great because she really was able, like, she was there through the whole stream, and she was helping out with the recipes and all those things. And when she got to the biryani level, which is the level I think most people have trouble with,
Mhm.
she didn't even check the memories or anything. She's just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the kid was gonna go check the memories. She was like, yeah, yeah, I know how to do. And to me, that's actually a really good sign, because it means that the recipes are accurate, and like the
Mhm.
research we did is paying
Mhm.
off, because they're not like, their instincts aren't wrong, right? So when they try something that they think will work, people who've cooked this their whole lives, it is actually working. And like, we had to compromise on the authenticity or the accuracy just a tiny bit to make it into a game, but I
Mhm.
was always careful, like, not to compromise too much. And I was really happy to see that. And during the stood up level, like, he was feeling very bad, and then like, his mom was like, what's the guarantee that you won't do this to me later? Like,
Oh.
she was using that to, like,
Oh.
guilt trip it. So that's really good to see that. And then the other stream was, he was just a very vibrant personality throughout the whole
Mhm.
thing. And then after stood up, he just crashed, and he was quiet for the rest of the stream. He spoke barely a few words. And then he canceled the streams that he scheduled later also.
Oh.
Uh,
Wow.
yeah, so it was just, and the community he had was very wholesome, and they were all like talking about, I've done something similar to this, and I
Mhm.
feel really bad. And he was like, don't feel bad. I think it's just something we all do, and something we can all do better. And that whole conversation, it's the exact conversation I was hoping it would inspire,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's what it did. So I was really happy to see that also.
Mhm.
Man, that is incredible. Like the authenticity element of that, I've got to imagine is a really hard thing to capture in a game format. But one of the things that we've been talking about as a community is how like telling stories that are kind of small and personal somehow allow for this like universal experience. And so like I was texting Jenny while I was playing through the game, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is really making me rethink how I relate to my parents and our
Mhm.
relationship." So I'm wondering how did you find the balance between wanting to tell like a story that hits on big themes while still like grounding it in like a specific family and a specific character's story?
Yeah, this is a question I do get a lot, and I do get it from other Indian game developers also, from India actually, and they're surprised, like, "Hey, how are you so, like, how did you boldly, like, just open the game's title in Tamil? Like, how come, like, they're wondering, should I not name my characters George, or like, those are the kind of things they're
Mhm.
wondering, because they're looking at the market, uh, outside the market, right? So they're wondering, if this are these the things that we need to do to get into the market. So when they see a game like Venba, which is, I think, very aggressively Tamil and very aggressively authentic, they're surprised. And it's only when they were surprised that I realized, oh yeah, I guess that is something Venba's
Mhm.
doing. And until then, there was not even a thought. Like, for me, it was about capturing this family, and like, whatever it took to capture it, is what I wanted the team to do. So it was never in question for me. Like, it was never a question of balance or anything. There was never a point in the game where I thought, oh, I don't think certain audiences will get this.
Mhm.
I just went for it, and maybe that is risky, but seeing how people are reacting, they're so open. People who are not from this culture are so open to these ideas. They're open to learning, and it gets their curiosity up. And like, even if they don't know exactly what's happening, they're okay with it. They're like, oh, they can piece together, because, like you said, the more personal it is, the more international it is, and that's exactly what one of my favorite Tamil directors. That's his catchphrase. He would say that a lot too. He would say, like, the more local you are, the more international you become, and I think that's
Ooh.
something I've really
Mhm.
ingrained. And he said that specifically to Tamil directors who were trying to make movies that would be received well at the Oscars. And he said, like, that should not even be your goal. Like, just make a movie that's received well here, and then the rest will come, right? So I think that's something that's deeply ingrained in me also.
Yeah, I'm curious what inspired you to focus on the two characters, particularly of Venba and Kavin, because I think you could have picked, you could have picked the father. There could have been any number of ways you could have told the story. Why was it important to tell it through their eyes?
Yeah. So I think the first point of focus is obviously Venba, right?
Mhm.
And I think the main themes of the game is that I've talked about this a bit before, but like the idea is that when it comes to diaspora media, which we've all seen growing up and we continue to see, they usually focus on Coven, or it's told from Coven's point of view, and it's told about and and that's fine, and that's their story to tell. But sometimes when I see the parents in that media, they are caricaturized. They come off a bit one. No, they come off a bit even comical sometimes. Like even their like the self we ourselves like exaggerate their accents, exaggerate their lack of understandings, and all of those things. And that used to really bother me because I felt like they were real people with a lot to say,
Mhm.
and often I felt like they had much cooler stories. So for me, it was very important to show the parents' perspective, specifically Memba's perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and when we're talking about culture and we're talking about assimilation, um, like the idea that food is very important in certain cultures, in all cultures really, but in South Asian cultures, like you not eating dinner will really break someone's heart. And I thought about why that is, and I thought about how it becomes twice as important when there's no actual language between the child and the parent, so food becomes
Mhm.
the only language, and it becomes very vital. So all those things came together, and for me, just the idea of like a mom trying to communicate to her son through cooking felt perfect. The reason why I wanted to focus on Coven towards the end is I thought by the fifth or sixth level, people are really hating Coven's guts, right? But like, there's no one is the villain, right? Like
Yeah.
really,
Hmm.
he doesn't want to behave the way he does, and uh, the way he behaves is also a form of self-defense or protective mechanisms.
Yeah.
So it was also important to show a bit of his side, and yeah, see how they come together in the end.
Mhm. Yeah, it was pretty incredible how I think many of us have these feelings of like, oh, Kevin or Kevin, don't do that. Like, I don't want him to like do behave this way or speak this way to his parents, but I think we've also all done that.
Yeah,
And so in a lot of ways, it becomes this like very self-reflective moment of, again, how are we relating to our parents? Um, and I appreciated that Venba did have this really subtle evolution and grappling of her own identity and her own struggles because it is something that, like you said, it's not often explored in media
yeah.
because we are often seeing it from like essentially Kavan's perspective.
Mhm.
I'm I would love to talk about the format of the game because what's really fascinating to me is we're inserted into almost seemingly like sort of piecemeal, random, perhaps even ordinary days in the lives of this family. We're not given a ton of context or significance beforehand. We're sort of just plopped in, and we have to use our own intuition and sort of observation to understand what's going on within that time period. How did you sift through just what events to highlight, what events to tell the story?
I'm really glad you brought that up, and actually, I think you phrased it really well already. Like you phrased what my motivations for that were.
Mhm.
That's exactly right because I wanted to show moments that are not necessary. There could have been way more dramatic moments in their lives already that we haven't seen, right? But what was like, you cook on not just dramatic days; you cook on mostly mundane things. But the conversations around, because it's a story told through cooking, I wanted to pick days that are mostly mundane, and are mostly uh, like the stood up level, for example, the level where she gets stood up feels like the most dramatic moment in the game, but her life is way more dramatic than that. Like a lot more
Mhm.
interesting things have happened than someone not showing up for dinner, right? So, but because it's told through food, the idea for me was that um, to show that how these characters are changing, but show it through a constant lens. Because to measure how something changes, you need something that doesn't change. And in
Mm.
this context, that was the food,
Mm.
right? The food, especially because they're recreating recipes from generations ago, even Venba is, it's been always the same. But their relationships to the food, and like to Venba, it becomes more and more important. To come in, becomes less and less important until he uh, decides to make his peace with it, right? So that's
Mhm.
why it skips over like a lot of different. I see a lot of comments like, oh, what happened to dad, or like, why I need to know exactly what happened. But I think like those details aren't important. And if I had even filled in those details, I think it would have made for a less impactful story
Mm.
than it hasn't, right? Because the idea is also that it's very fleeting, these moments, and you think you have all these days or all these levels, but it just suddenly, your time is very limited, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I have my Steam Deck up here, and I'm just like going through like the many screenshots that I took, and the way that you captured like those small mundane moments, but they told such a compelling and like emotionally gripping story. I was looking at the series of conversations that happen when the mother and father like are in bed, and
Oh,
Kavan's laying between them, and it's just like the fact that this is such an intimate moment, and it's a small moment, but it's a conversation, like this idea of the balance between their cultural heritage versus the culture where they're at right now. It felt like such a universal message, but it told in such a small moment that it's just like, I don't know, it really got me. That was one of those moments that really spoke to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
What were some of the like as you think about like your as you think back towards the story in the game, like what were some of like the small moments that you found to be like that really like stuck with you as you've gone back into the game and thought through it?
Yeah. I think I really like how Coven is introduced. He's wearing a cape and he's running. And the first dialogue, like it's not the game is not just critical of Coven; it's also critical of Venba, because the first dialogue that Venba has towards Coven is she's trying to get him to change from something he's wearing into something that he doesn't want to wear, which is what she's doing the entire
mhm.
entire game, right? So I think that is something I really like just the chaos. Of the dad being on a phone interview. Normally, that would be a time for hushed conversations in the house, but they've just done it so many times that he's just gone through so many rejections that like they don't even bother keeping quiet anymore, because they're like, what
Mm,
difference is it gonna make? So and like in a limited household, those spaces don't give you time for. So just that the way that whole sequence plays out is something I really like. The movement of the characters and all of that, right? So that's one. I really like Coven with the mask and the texting, and I really like the use of Pavlin's classes. Also, is something. Uh,
mm.
all these things were not there in the beginning, and it's just things we kept adding later on. And then I really, really like the entire terrace sequence in the final, where Coven and Venba have a heart to heart. Yeah.
Oh, that was so good. And wow, I did not pick up on the subtleties around like the reason that they're not giving space for like the interview conversation is because it's happened so much. Like now that you said it, it's like, oh yeah, like the implication that he's gone through this so many times was definitely there in the text, but the way you told that story through the motion and the momentum and movement in the house, that's
Thank you.
just brilliant
So
storytelling.
good.
Wow. Ugh.
I would love to hear more because the thing elements of motion, for example, the camera movement, even the music, especially not even the music, especially the music. Um, I think there's a lot of really wonderful attention to detail, and I was wondering if you could also speak to perhaps starting with maybe camera movement and sort of the cinematic feel, and then also the music, and just what were some of the thinking that you had as you put that into the as another layer to the story.
Yeah. So first off, like the camera has like a very handheld feeling to it, like it shakes throughout the entire game, and also like that is because like the whole idea is that we are only getting a small window into this family's life.
Mhm.
Like we are a fly on the wall, and we're observing them from a distance. Is basically what I wanted to portray, and that's also why you don't get to know exactly what happens to the family or exactly what the details are in this family, right? It's just snapshots here and there that you get a glimpse of. And I wanted the camera to be not as cinematic, but like more loose so that it conveys that loose feeling. And the other thing is that even though it's a visual novel kind of thing, we wanted the animations and everything to be very dynamic, very movie-like in a way. So there's cuts where there's like cuts that shouldn't be possible, like when there's a close-up, we hide a character so that it looks like an actual close-up and everything, so that the emotions and everything have a place to stay. Um, and your second question was about music, right? Yeah. So the music I'm super super happy about because it was just one more area where we can just do a lot more storytelling, a lot more give a lot more insight into the culture, because like Venba is such a limited game that like you don't even get to move around in the house, and if you do, I could have done many things like, oh, what is this item? What is this item for? And this item means that. Like it just opens it up so much. But because it doesn't do that, I have a very limited space to like spoon feed as much culture as I can possibly can. And as soon as we figured out that we're going to do music the way we did, which is play actual songs that we've composed for the game, and the idea is that the songs throughout the ages they mimic or pay homage to the songs we heard growing up. So in the 80s, it would be very much in the style of a composer that is very popular in the 80s and the 90s and so on, right? As soon as that happened, it was very freeing because it did all the weightlifting and like you can even see the progression of the music. It goes from very old timey to very modern, and the lyrics also, even though it's in Tamil, it does a lot of storytelling. The coolest part for me was in the puttu level. The person who sings in the song is actually the same composer we were trying to pay homage to in that in that era. So
Whoa!
So cool.
yeah, so we actually lined up like, oh, each song represents this music composer and everything, and then that was the last song we recorded. But we thought like, hey, what if we actually get him, because he used to sing on a lot of his own songs.
Yeah.
We never thought he would say yes, but he did, and that was very
Wow.
amazing for us. Yeah, so all those details are great. I think another favorite detail for me is in the level where she cooks the feast. Um, the song there uh, plays a different section of the song plays for each item you cook, and the song is actually describing the recipe for the thing you cook as you cook it. And we've also tried to like match up the lyrics to the actions also. So like uh, when you tear the coriander up, it's actually describing like the tearing action and stuff like that. So
Wow.
that to me is like almost like a Tamil music video, like just like the if this scene was in a Tamil movie, how would it be? Like, so, and music is always plays a big role in Indian movies. So that's what we're trying to do there. So I'm really happy about that.
Oh,
That's just outstanding. Like the level of just, again, it's the way you're embedding all of this sort of cultural knowledge and just like the textures in there without like having honestly, even if you had the opportunity to have like a pickup item read a thing, it's like this is such a wonderful way to just immerse people in it and not have it feel I don't know, forced in any kind
Mhm.
of way. It just felt right. I
Thank
remember
you.
that level actually, and it did feel like I was in a music video. Like I felt very cool,
Yeah.
because it just seemed to seamlessly go together, and the song seamlessly seemed to like kind of go with the flow. And I
Mhm.
didn't understand what the lyrics were, but now that I do, I'm like, oh my gosh, so
Thank you.
cool.
yeah. There's just you've incorporated so much nuance into this story. The topic itself, this diaspora storyline, and kind of the multicultural experience for this immigrant family, um, it doesn't feel like there's this negative message. Like this experience was they made the bad decision to do this thing. It
Mhm.
felt more like you've made these very well-rounded characters. They're dealing with very complex issues and decisions from beginning to end. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is most of the story is indoors in a relatively confined space. And in that last scene, you're on kind of like this
Mhm.
rooftop balcony scenario. and it's almost like subconsciously there's like this deep exhalation where it's just like
Mhm.
like this feels good. And so I'm just wondering about like the composition of that last scene and what was
Mhm.
going through your mind there.
Yeah, I wanted the last conversation to be set on the backdrop of Chennai, which is where their roots are from and everything. And yeah, in general, I just wanted the last, like the ending of Venba is a bit ambiguous. They have made up, but we don't know what their relationship is going to be like. But I didn't want it to end on a note of hope. Like they're both hopeful and they're both optimistic about their future, and as soon as those themes came in, the idea of it being an open, like to me, standing in the terrace back home is a very freeing and open,
Mhm.
especially it gets so windy and it's so nice for me. So those are the things that, like, to me, it felt like in Shawshank Redemption, there.
Yeah. Oh my
it,
gosh.
Ah,
yeah,
Yeah.
and then in the end scene, he's just in the outside, right? So they're all taking in the city is what I wanted. And Benba is finally home. She's where she
Mhm.
wants to be, and she's at peace, right? So her story is a story of sacrifice, right? And I think for the longest time, she's also starting to resent the people she's sacrificing for, and that's a bit of an ugly feeling. And so when she moves away, she's able to make peace. She's able to accept it. Yeah, those. I'm so glad you guys are picking up on these
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Speaking of another just moment and level, one of my favorite just interactive points was the equivalent of like almost a boss rush, which was the feast. You
Mhm.
have these many dishes that you're building, that you're constructing together. It's a super high energy point in time. Um, I'm really curious. What was your favorite cooking level to design? And if you could explain just a little bit about why.
Yeah, I think biryani
Yeah.
is my favorite. Biryani is huge in India and especially in Tamil Nadu. Like it's a meme how much we like biryani, which for all essence is actually just meat and rice. And to me, it's very interesting because biryani, like its history starts from like rice pilaf in the Middle East, and as it goes, it changes. And when it comes to India, each state changes it. Like each state in India has a different version of it, and to me,
Mhm.
almost the personality of that state shows in the way they change the dish, right? So for me, biryani like is something I'm very passionate about. Like it's for me, if I'm in a good mood, I'll probably be making biryani, and it's very festive and all of that. And more than the puzzle design and the recipe design. Once they finish making biryani, I really like how excited Venba is about it, how excited Paul, and he's like smelling it, and there's just like metal guitar with the biryani meat falling, right? And then it's completely juxtaposed, and there's like awkward silence at the dining table when they're eating
Mhm.
it. So that's how it feels when I see biryani, and then when I show it to my friends or somebody, not that they react badly, but that's how it feels. It's just a dish. So for me, that was very fun to,
Yeah.
and also like we've personally made it a point to like cook the dishes we've shown in the game multiple times
Mhm.
ourselves before we decide to make it into a puzzle and all of that. So that's just an excuse to expense company funds to make biryani. So
Yeah,
heck
honestly,
yeah.
the best work assignment ever.
yeah,
Just have
yeah,
to cook these amazing dishes. I did like that table scene though, because I think if I'm remembering correctly, like there's this sort of one element of a serious conversation kind of happening, but then, the dad, he's just like, I don't have any meat.
Did
Where's
I
the
yeah,
even
meat
get
in
any
my dish?
meat? What?
Yeah. So I thought that was also a really interesting juxtaposition, also in the relationship of the characters and sort of where some of their attention was lying or sort of where
yeah.
their focus is lied.
Yeah, it's just such a. I think this is something all moms do across all cultures. Is that like in my house, my dad only gets the scraps, right? And like it's not even something I would notice until much later. I'm like, why are you doing this? Like I feel bad. I'm not gonna right. And he's like, he doesn't even react like Pavlin does. He's like, no, no, I only I'm fine with the scraps. You eat.
Yeah.
Like she's cooked for you. She hasn't cooked for which is
Oh,
which is a thing I think is across it's just another expression of love. And for the dad, I guess it's usually um, it's like it's also his way of sacrificing for the child, right? And
Mhm.
it's so natural, it's so inherent. It's something like if there's chicken, the dad would probably take the chicken breast and leave the chicken legs for the son. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, but it's something we don't notice until we're much older, or when we're put in the same spot and we're making the same decisions, right? So, uh,
Yeah.
yeah. But for biryani, I just wanted to like that was just acknowledging how shitty it is for dads in those scenes.
Oh, it's such a funny moment. You mentioned something a second ago, which is that Venba could be becoming maybe resentful
Mm.
because of her situation. And one of the calendar quotes that was in the game is "Longing for those who have forsaken you diminishes the beauty of the soul."
Mhm.
And it was just like, ooh, like that was such a
Yeah.
good moment. But the more I think about it in the context of like how you were just describing it, is like there are so many places in the game where that has happened. Like we learn a little bit about their relationship and why they ended up,
Mhm.
immigrating to begin with. And it's like, well, was there an element where their home culture felt like it had maybe forsaken them a little bit? They're now in Canada and where they're just kind of completely isolated and being left to their own like survival. And it's like, has Canadian culture like also, forsaken them? And then you get the inner family dynamics as a part of that as well. And so I'm just kind of wondering, thematically, like where do you see that story coming from? Are there other places where you see that message kind of living within your game?
Yeah, so I think it's different, right? Like, first, I will say that the calendar code is so good because it wasn't written by me. Those are called those are ancient poems written, centuries and centuries ago, and that's why there's a Tamil and English translation. They're called Tirukkurals, which is written by the person in the calendar. He wrote them. Um, and the neat thing is that they are a form of venpas, like the form of poetry. That's why I thought it fit this game
Oh
really
my
What?
great.
gosh, just blew
Right?
my
Oh,
mind.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say that in case I was getting credit for writing that, which I didn't. But
yeah, great.
um, yeah, so we wanted to pick the Venpas that we thought were relevant to the level. To your question, I think it's really different, right? Like I think it's possible that there's a lot of kids who are growing up now who might not relate to Coven at all. They're like, "What are you talking about?" Like when I bring Indian food to my school, it's a big hit, you know. But I think it's way different in the 80s, right? So
Yeah,
like
way different.
so for Venva and Pavlin, they're like pioneers to an extent, right? So to leave the world is much it's shrunk a lot more now, right? So
Mhm.
you can come to Canada, find out that this is not a place you vibe with, and then go back, right? Like that's an option now. But back then, that's a commitment. That's a lifelong commitment that you're making, right? So for Venba, I think it's just that it's touched upon a bit, but her family is okay with her relationship with Pavlin, but Pavlin's family is not okay with it. So the whole reason they even moved to Canada is for Pavlin's sake. So that's her starting her first sacrifices, right? And she had a great job there, great life there, and everything. Her parents, she's obviously very close to her mom, and she had to put all that behind, and she's coming here. And then here she's not fulfilled in her career, um, and then slowly as she has her son and her son is growing away apart from her, like she just starts to feel like what's the point, like why do I um and there's another question where like Calvin is like, yeah, you made all these sacrifices, but I didn't ask you to, or to be fair, that is a fair point. Like it's
Mhm.
hard to be held responsible for those sacrifices when they were made
Mhm.
before you were born, right? So
Right.
and I think that's this line of resentment that's in Benba's character throughout the entire game. And I think that's why the ending. That's why I think it is very hopeful because her moving back to India is not, I think, something a lot of moms would do.
Mhm.
It's a big step, but it's very in character for her. She finally realizes, yeah, this is not like she realizes what she's doing. It hurts, it's painful, but ultimately her emotions are starting to come mainly from resentment, which is not a very healthy place to be. So um, she decides to move back, and I think that starts to heal. But yeah, like if you think about it, Pavlin is a Tamil writer, but he's way more cool with Coven speaking English than Venba, right? So who is not a Tamil writer. So for her, the attack, her forgetting Coven forgetting Tamil is much more than Coven forgetting Tamar. It's maybe Coven like forgetting her, you know. So that's like
Mm.
she puts her identity tied to the culture's identity, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's where the resentment comes from.
Oh, that's so good. I can I ask another question,
Yeah,
Jenny?
sure.
Is that all
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So when we are reading Commons texts with his
Oh,
job, that was first of all like the format shift to kind of reading through text and like trying to understand the story in that way was such a really cool way to like shift the pace and experience in the game, kind of mechanically. But what is coming through as you're reading this dialogue is this idea of like I don't want to be too harsh, but what feels like maybe an exploitative relationship that whoever he's texting is trying to like extract something from him and his cultural experience and identity. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you could talk to a bit and like what that scene was encompassing for you.
Yeah, I think that's the one that I'm surprised about because people are really responding to that whole scene a lot more than I thought they would, which has been really good to see. I think the character design, Sam, our artist, he really killed it because as soon as they see Chris's face, they groan even before they've seen a single text from him, which I'm really, I'm really surprised.
I laughed because I did too. I just said, "Oh, Chris!" Like I just
Oh,
knew. I was
Chris.
like,
Yeah,
"Chris."
somehow, yeah. I almost wanted to tweet who's your favorite character in Venba? Like, is it Chris? And, like, I didn't expect that level of. There's something we're all putting on Chris, I think. Uh, but honestly, I feel like Chris is just doing his job, right? Like, I think he is a person who is trying to write a show that
Mhm.
has a lot of voices that are not his, right? So he's trying to do his job. He's trying to reach out to people. The way I think it's great that these last 10 years we've really started talking about representation and everything, right? But I think ultimately the way it's set up is set up to be exploitative to begin with, right? Like it's a machine, right? And now the machine knows to look for diverse voices, but it's still exploitative, right? So there's no getting around that, right? So Chris is just operating that machine, but he doesn't know any better, right? So
Mm.
I think what I really wanted to convey in that scene is I wanted to call out uh, everybody, including myself, that there is now a space for representation and all of these things. But like, are we really the right people to fill that role, right? Like, if someone says, "Hey, I need a Tamil writer," should I rush to fill that? Should I do some introspection first and make sure what is my history been with the Tamil culture? Have I been?
Mm.
Am I? Do I know enough? Am I the best person here, right? But I think, and that's why I think, like Kevin reacts in that scene in the way I hope people would react, which is it leads to introspection, it leads to guilt, and he's like, you know what, let me figure out what my if he was a person who had made peace with his identity and he was much more comfortable being Tamar, I think that Chris's text wouldn't have bothered him as much, right? He would have still found a way to like tell the story that he wants to tell. But because he's like, oh, look at me, I'm just capitalizing on this situation, and that's what he cannot take, right? He's conflicted about it, like we can't tell, but he is conflicted about his actions throughout the entire game, and that's what makes him react the way it does there. But I thought that's one of those things that it's too subtle, but it's been really nice to see people people react to it. Yeah.
I will say the moment because Kevin starts by responding sort of his true feelings.
Yeah.
And the moment when I was like, yes, we're going to send this text, and then it initiates him like actually backing everything up, I don't think I yelled so much, both in my own head and at just like out loud, because that was such a relatable moment. And that was such a true moment, I think. But you
Yeah.
could definitely feel the conflict for him.
Yeah.
You mentioned this idea of, is this a story, that I can tell? Do I have the responsibility to be one of the voices that steps up? And I'm really curious, perhaps if I don't know if it gets too heavy or meta, but being a team that is creating a game that is very unusual in the game space, that is not a story that is, I don't think it's ever been told truthfully in the game space. Have you felt that sense of or how have you felt that sense of responsibility, I guess, in being that voice?
Yeah, and this is a question that I honestly still don't have the answer to.
Mm.
Right, so like sometimes I wonder if I knew that Venba would have found such a big audience, because when we first started, it was two people working in a mobile game studio, and we were messing around, right? So the fact, like, it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So um, I would have never thought, like, on day one we would have reviews from all the big sites and stuff like that. To me, that's great. But I think I would have definitely hesitated if I knew that from the beginning, because um, I don't know if I think it's always good to have the doubt, like, are you the right person to tell the story, right? And I definitely carry that doubt. And I think if I knew that it would get so big, I'm not sure that would have scared me so much that I would have not made Venba. But I think throughout the process, I am really happy that what I did was, anytime when whether I'm showing a recipe or whether I'm showing songs, it's not just my decision. It's very communal. We talked to so many different people and got a lot of different views and perspectives, and that's part of research also, right? So the way I look at it is, when we talk about who can tell what story, um, personally, I think the reason why we're pushing for a certain group to tell their own stories, like, if a story has to do with a certain group, it's best if that group tells it, right? And the reason why we're pushing for, from a if we put the social justice angle aside, from a pure artistic standpoint, it's because they have the most uh, research on it, right? Just from their lived experiences and everything, right? So I think pre-production is very important when you make a game. And when you make a game like this, your life itself starts to act like a big pre-production process, because you can draw from so many things. But then there's also a risk, because you could pass off your life as the only experience, right? So I was very careful not to do that, and like to refer to people, and just the way the game kept growing, and the amount of people, the chef consultants, the home cooks we talked to, or when it comes to music, the number of artists we collaborate, everybody brought their own perspective. Um, so I think I am really happy. The only thing I'm scared of is, Venba is the first out and out Tummer game to be available, and that is a position that I want Venba to occupy for as little time as possible.
Mm.
And like I think the real fear that I have is that Venba is a representation, but it could be seen as representative of the entire culture, no game can be, right? So
Right.
I think the real problem here is that there's only one Tummer game, right? So if there's a bunch of others, then I wouldn't feel feel this responsibility.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure what the right thing to have done is yet, but I think I tried to be very responsible about the things we showed. And then the other thing we're trying to do is, like, talk to a bunch of developers from back home and trying to
Mm.
make sure that they can make the games that they want to make,
Cool.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm happy that you all did make Venba, that you did get that ball rolling. And it's really exciting that you are doing those knowledge shares with other developers, because that's the way to make sure it isn't the only game that is that's from like your home and from your culture.
I will say that there's like all these discords that I'm part of, not just Indian game developer discords, but also um, um, Indian gamers discords and stuff like that. And for them, it's blowing their mind that mainstream streamers that are not Tamil, like it's not a Tamil game for Tamil people. It's a Tamil game for everybody. And like
Yeah.
people like you picking up on it, making content about it, talking, reacting to it, resonating with it emotionally. Like to them, it shows a path, right? So I think it really makes a huge difference. I think, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's beautifully done. Again, I was saying, but right before we started the call, I've played it multiple times already, and I will play it even more. I'm curious because we talked about your favorite sort of food from the game, or just maybe even in general, was the biryani. But I'm curious if you were to have a musical recommendation for folks, if they loved the soundtrack and they're like, where can we go? What can we look up to get more of this music? I
Oh
see
man.
you loading up the Spotify. I would love
Well,
to know just some recommendations.
yeah. So I was on the Kind of Funny game showcase, and Greg Miller had the exact same question. So
Yeah.
I made a Spotify playlist for him. That like basically this a
Heck
list of
yeah.
songs that inspired the Venba song. So I can share that
Oh,
with you all, and then you can put it
that
in
would be
the
amazing. Yes, please.
Fantastic. Yes.
Joel, I don't know if you had any last just like questions you wanted to ask or anything on your mind.
No, yeah,
Um,
I want to just reemphasize the sensory effect of Venba in terms of like everything from the engagement of the music and like feeling like I could almost smell the crackling of the
oh, yeah.
oil when you're cooking. And it's just like, we were talking about how it's like, yeah, we need to order. Like I had biryani literally the night I finished the game. I
Oh,
ordered some in. I was like, I have to have some right now. It's been so long. So the way that you were able to engage the senses for people, I just, even beyond storytelling, the way you were able to do that was just so incredible. So I just wanted to make sure I gave that some time in the spotlight because it was
Yeah.
such a
that's
cool
awesome.
experience.
I think huge credits goes to Neha Patel, our sound designer, for that, because she's actually from the north part of India. Like her roots are from she was born and brought up in Quebec, but so she was actually unfamiliar with a lot of the recipes or the utensils. But like she made it like her mission to like get them, like cook it for herself, like record all live sounds and everything, and I think a lot of people are really praising the sound design, and I'm really, really happy to see her work uh, get paid off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible.
Most delicious game of the year for sure. Before we head out, did you want to share where folks can find you, where folks can find the team, and keep up with just future projects that you have going on?
Uh, I think we're still a very small team, so I'm really bad about keeping my socials updated. So we're still on Twitter, is still our main place. We'll find a new place soon. But Venba itself, it's on every platform: Steam, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation. But we're on TikTok, Venba Game on TikTok, and we're Venba Game on Twitter. Uh, if we move somewhere, we'll make sure to announce it there. So.
Okay, great.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Thank you to you and your team for making Venba. And yeah, we'll have to chat again at some point.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Congratulations.
Cool. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today in our conversation with Abhi to talk about Venba, which high contender for Game of the Year right now.
Oh
Absolutely
my gosh.
incredible.
Yeah, it is my personal game of the year at this point in time. I adore it. I know it's very personal reasons for me adoring it, but yeah, I think this is definitely one of the top experiences for me this year.
Do you think we just need to like do some cooking together? Just like get
Oh
together,
yeah,
find a recipe,
yes.
make a
Well,
complete
I
fool
should
of
show you
myself.
how to make dosas because our we have
Yes,
a coworker who actually previously taught me how to make dosas. And so when they showed up in the game, I was like, oh, I actually there besides biryani, I know what this is. So I could totally show you how to make some dosas.
let's do it. I am so into that. Maybe you can come to my place since we have the old air
I
conditioner
know.
right
I have the good old fan next to me. It's just the box fan that's currently blowing into my face because it's the only way I can stay relatively cool.
Absolutely. So, Jenny, where can people find you on social medias?
Yeah, folks can find me on Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube and Blue Sky at Kimchica. And where can folks find you, Joel?
You can find me at my Grand Falloon on all those same places. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Nice. And again, if you would like to follow all of the good news coming out from Geeks and Grounds, visit geeksandgrounds.com. That's where you can sign up for the weekly newsletter. That's the hub. If you don't want to miss a thing, you want to get the newsletter every week. That's again, geeksandgrounds.com. You can also find us on technically Twitter, but probably not going to be so active there anymore. I would say find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Geeks and Grounds. And yeah, please do send an email over if you have comments, questions, things you wanted to ask us at Jenny at Geeks and Grounds.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us today. As you are sitting there with your cup of joe, just remember it's not hot, it's just a little spicy.
It's a little spicy.
It's a little spicy.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.